Alright guys, what is up? And today I'm coming at you with a deck profile on a bit of an older deck I've had for quite some time now. I did show this off about a year ago, an older variant of this. But this is basically my burn deck. This isn't your typical burn deck. Like normally you would play like Chain Strikes, Accumulated Fortune, Secret Barrels, or some things like, for example, Nurse Burn, where you play Nurse, Bad Reaction to Samochi, and a lot of cards that would normally increase your opponent's life points, but instead would burn you for them. This one's more oriented towards like kind of a control deck, so it's not necessarily oriented towards burning your opponent super quickly, but kind of slowly stalling them, slowly stalling the game and burning them out a little bit at a time. And sometimes you can go for big amounts if you set up your board right. But if you are looking to play this deck in real life, or just in general, some people may consider this a troll deck just because normally burn decks are associated with being a troll deck, just because it's kind of like Yugioh or Magical Explosion, or more specifically the Monarch FTK, which is basically Magical Explosion. A lot of people would consider those troll decks, which I kind of consider them to be troll decks because all they do is sit there and draw a whole bunch of cards and require little to no interaction with your opponent at all. This one wouldn't exactly fit by those standards just because it does require a fair bit of interaction with your opponent. Some of which being actually reading some of the card effects to your opponent, because a lot of these cards are really old and not a lot of people know what they do, so you kind of have to summarize the effects and explain it to them. But I did profile this deck for you guys about a year ago. It was one of the first decks I built when I got back into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Just because it was cheap and it won a whole lot of games and did fairly well at a lot of my local tournaments. Didn't really do too well just because it was back in the, around the time Zexal was like almost finished, so around the time of, I want to say Judgment of the Light maybe. So that was around Bujin format for a little bit, and then it turned into Hat, which is just like a really heavy anti-meta format, and then a little bit into Duelist Alliance whenever Korshadals, Yang Zings, and then Burning Abyss and Satellar Knights were all the top decks, so it had okay matchups against them just with my older decks, but now it's just kind of a deck I play on the side for fun. But yeah, enough about the story behind the deck. Let's just go ahead and get into it. So starting off with the monsters, you have the big boss monster, Lava Golem. A lot of you guys should know what this card does. It's pretty much a really iconic monster from the anime, where you basically just tribute two of your opponent's monsters to special summon it, and then they get burned for 1,000 during each of their standby phases. So basically what this is it's a nice one of. Some people have recommended me to play two, but I just prefer one because sometimes it does clog. And plus, it does take up your summon for the turn, so you can't normal summon or set during the turn you activate this. So it's best to have this with like a Swift Scarecrow and Battle Fader in hand to protect yourself. Because otherwise, you're going to be taking 3,000 to the phase, which really sucks. So you want to have something to protect yourself during the turn you drop that. If they do have ways to tribute it, that's fine. They could also, like, say, Dark Hole or Raigeki it. Or even, or in most cases, it's going to be Bottomless Trap Hole, but it's just there to get a quick bit of 1,000 damage off, and just to get rid of annoying monsters that are kind of messing up your plays. This one's kind of stayed the same, but 3 Marshmallow. Just because it's honestly one of the trolliest cards in the game. You set it, pass, they attack into it, they take 1,000, and then it can't be destroyed by battle. That's really all there is to it. It's just a cute little wall that does 1,000 damage if your opponent attacks into it. The next 2, Fencing Fire Ferret, kind of the same thing as Marshmallow, and you kind of just set it and pass. Also has 1,700 attack, but in the very rare case where you actually can attack with this, 1,700 is kind of nice. But in most cases, you just set it, and if it's destroyed by battle or card effect, you pop a face-up monster and then burn for 500, and that's really about it. It's just pop and burn, because this deck doesn't really have a whole lot of destruction power. It's just mainly setting up a field, controlling what your opponent can and can't do, and then just burning for massive amounts of damage. The next 2 Swift Scarecrow and 2 Battle Fader. These are pretty self-explanatory because you have a lot of ways of basically just telling your opponent, no, you can't attack. And that's what these cards are there for, is also Lava Golem. Because it's really annoying to have your monsters tributed, and then you summon Lava Golem, you take 1,000, and then you try to attack them for 3k, and then you just drop a Battle Fader and be like, okay, take 1,000 again next turn. So yeah, just really annoying. That's what these cards are for, is kind of your defensive cards. 1 Grand Mole, because you're only allowed to play 1 copy. This just kind of is basically your compulse of the deck. where anytime he battles an opponent's monster before damage calculation, they both return to the hand. Back when I first built this deck, and one of my friends was playing Dragon Rulers, he had a Star Eater on field, and he put up a lot of, he was playing the Heraldic version, so it was a little bit harder for him to make, because he had to use a lot of resources to summon Star Eater, where he had to summon a Tefnuit, and then tribute it for, I want to say it's either Eset or Nebthet. It's the purple one, it's a level 5. And then its effect went off, and he summoned Labordat Dragon Synchro for Star Eater. And then I was like, okay, I can't respond to Star Eater's summoning or him attacking, so I just summoned Grand Mole and then bounced him back to hand, which kind of really pissed him off. The one Princess of Sarugi, bumped her down to 1, but I just couldn't bring myself to cut her out of the deck just because she's a nostalgic card for me, because she actually was my first card. Not this exact copy, the exact card I've had since I was a kid is actually in a binder somewhere. But she's really good for your opponent that likes to set a fair amount of back row. Oh, bump the camera. Where basically what you do is you just set her, and then if they flip her, she does 500 for each spell and trap your opponent has on the side of the field. So normally this will be doing about... normally, in most cases, your opponent doesn't have a lot of back row, but normally it's 5 for your main spell and trap zones. So that's 25, plus the field spell, it's 3,000, and now with the addition of pendulums, it can become 4,000, or 4,500, something like that. But it's going to be very, very rare that they actually do have 5 back row, a field spell, and their pendulum zone's full. But just kind of give you an idea, if they do play for an amount of back row and they do flip this, it does a big chunk of their life points. And something else I teched in is 2 copies of Aroma Jar, because there are some cards in this deck where you will be burning yourself, and to kind of get yourself back in the game, this is what Aroma Jar does. And it can't be destroyed by battle, and then during each player's end phase, you gain 500 life points. And if you have 2 of these on the field, you set them, and then if your opponent does happen to attack into 2 of them, they can't be destroyed by battle. And they have to use a Dark Hole or Regeki or some sort of card effect just to get rid of them, because they can't be destroyed by battle. And then their end phase will go, and this one will give you 500, and then it stacks. So if you have 2 on the field, you're going to be gaining 1,000 life points during either player's turn, which is really, really good. So it's just another stall card to sit there and kind of get you back in the game if you use a fair amount of life points. Now getting on to the main portion of the deck, the spells and traps. For the spells, 3 Chain Energy. This card is just really, really dumb and super annoying to play against. But I'll explain some of these older cards that some people might not be familiar with. Basically what Chain Energy does is, while it's facing on the field, both players have to pay 500 life points just to place a card from their hand on the field. So to normal summon, special summon from the hand, set spell or traps, or activate spell or traps from their hand, they have to pay 500. So even if they do have an MST, they still have to pay 500 life points just to get rid of it. So it's really, really handy. And plus, if you have multiples on the field, they do stack. And I've had plenty of instances where I've had all 3 on the field, and it's just really, really dumb. But a way to play around this is, because normally most people will be like, oh, activate Chain Energy, and then I'd pay 500 life points to activate another one, so on and so forth. What you can actually do is, if you have 2 of these, you can set them on the field, and then activate them, and so they're already on the field, and you don't have to pay the cost to play them, so that's another kind of fun way to play around that. And it's just like one of your main kind of control cards, because your opponent really, really has to think over the plays, because it's essentially like a Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon, where they have to pretty much pay 500 life points to play around it. Then also play 3 Chicken Game. This is one of your draw cards of the deck, because this deck doesn't exactly have a lot of draw power because it is a stall deck, but there are some instances where you want to dig for combo pieces that you really, really need. For example, Chain Energy being one of them. Also, if you have a Lava Golem, you could dig for like a Battle Fader or something. And plus, if your life points are lower than your opponent's, and this is on the field along with Chain Energy, you don't have to pay your life points to play stuff for Chain Energy. So if you have this on the field and then the 2 Chain Energies, it really, really comes in handy, because then your opponent's going to have to pay life points just to kind of get around that annoying kind of, I wouldn't really say it's a lock, but more of like a controlled setup, I guess. I don't really know how to word it. The 2 Terraforming, just to search out the Chicken Games. It can also be discard fodder for some of our traps. 2 Pot of Duality, again another draw card of the deck, because the only special summoning you really do in this deck is for Lava Golem, and then your Battle Faders. Everything else is just like you set it and pass, or if Scarecrow, you just discard it and tell them no. So it doesn't really hinder you that much. Then 2 copies of Burning Land. This is one of your ways to get around to get rid of Chain Energy, because you don't really have a lot of spell and trap destruction in this deck. But whenever you activate this, it destroys any field spell cards on the field, and then during each player's standby phase, they'll take 500 life points. So if you activate this, you're going to get rid of your Chicken Game, and if your opponent's getting protected under Chicken Game, this is this is what gets rid of it. And then during their turn, they'll just take 500 life points, and then you take 500 life points. So each time they try and draw for an out to this, they're going to be sitting there and burning themselves slowly out of life points. So just kind of really puts pressure on your opponent because they want to get those destruction cards as quickly as possible. The next 2 ground collapse, really old card also from Pharaoh's Servant, like a lot of these cards. But whenever you activate this, you pick 2 of your opponent's monster card zones, and then those can't be used. There's a soft lock you can do with this in Geometry, which I'll get into later, but it's a pretty straightforward kind of combo. The One Sword's Revealing Light, another stall card, just because if your opponent starts getting some monsters on the field that have a fair amount of attack, you can just play this and sit there and stall for a game until you get your combo cards you really need, or just stuff to stall even more, whichever works. Then next, 2 copies of Toll. This also can make a really annoying setup. Where basically each player has to pay 500 life points per monster to attack, and like Chain Energy, this card also stacks. So it's really annoying with this card, the Dark Door, which I play 1 of, where only 1 monster can attack during each battle phase. So one of the most annoying setups I've had in this deck is these 2 on the field with Chain Energy, and I gave my opponent a Lava Golem. Then they only have 1 monster to attack per turn, so they try to activate... or they attack with Lava Golem, they pay the 500 life points per cost, and that's their 1 attack. And then, like, say they'd run into a Battle Fader, or a Magic Cylinder, or a Marshmallow, so it does even more damage. So, these cards kind of combo well with each other if you have the stuff to back it up, where it really limits them to what they can do. Trying to attack over all of your monsters, or whatever stuff you have in hand. One Ukazi, this is basically Cowboy. It actually came in handy when I was playing this deck against one of my friends whenever he played Cyframes. Activated Burning Land, and he negated it, and he only had 500 life points left. So I activated Burning Land, which would have beat him that turn. And then he special summoned the one that lets you negate a spell, and then he special summoned Driver, and he didn't have Cyframe Circuit, the field spell, out, so he couldn't synchro summon that turn. So then I dropped this, and it's essentially Cowboy for game. You just burn him for 800. Then next, 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. Because if you do go up against someone where they do play anti-spell fragrance, that card is really going to mess you up, because this is a very spell-heavy deck, so this is what that does. But also it can be discard fodder for a couple of one of the traps, which I'll get into later. One Dark Snake Syndrome, this is a really interesting card. I did play it at 2, but cut it down to 1 just because main deck space was kind of an issue. But during each of your standby phases, as in you, the person playing this card, you inflict damage to both players at the exact same time, and it begins at 200, and during each turn it gets doubled. Funny story about this card, I was playing this against someone that was playing Yang Zings whenever they first came out, and I played this, and the life point damage eventually got up to 32, and ended up killing both of us at the same time, so I had to call someone over and rule it, and we looked it up, and turns out the damage does get inflicted at the exact same time, so if one person has, like, say 3200, you have, like, maybe 15 or something like that, it'd go into a tie. So this card's just really annoying if your opponent's really trying their hardest to get around all of your annoying cards. And this is just like, you know what, let's start all over again. The one Emergency Provisions, because you do play a lot of face-up spell cards, so you can just send them all to the graveyard and give you a bunch of life. The next, for the traps, 3 just desserts. Just really combos well with Geometry, or if your opponent's going to set up some kind of board, especially if they like to Pendulum Summon. So you can Pendulum Summon like 3, 4, or even 5 cards. You flip this, and it just burns them for a ton of damage. Just really annoying if you flip out. And plus, like a lot of cards in the deck, it does stack, so... I actually had one time where my opponent was playing Cyber Dragons, and he had Core, a Cyber Dragon, and a Galaxy Soldier on the field. Then just flip, and then do 1500 for each monster, which actually cost him the game, which really sucked. The next 2 copies of Ceasefire, because you're only allowed to play 2 copy in a deck. Flips all face-down monsters on the field face up. Flip effects aren't activated at that time, and then your opponent takes 500 for each effect monster on the field, so including your own. So if you have like a Battle Fader, or a Swift Scarecrow, or Marshmallow, or whatever, it's also going to contribute to damage. So if your opponent basically has a lot of monsters on the field like Chain Energy, or not like Chain Energy, like just desserts, you just flip multiples of these and burn for a ton of damage. The next 3 Magic Cylinders, card's pretty self-explanatory. Something I want to do for this is swap this out with Dimension Wall. If you don't know what Dimension Wall does, it's a card out of Cybernetic Revolution, where it literally does the exact same thing, except for Magic Cylinder targets, and Dimension Wall doesn't. So if I was to play this deck, say, like, up against Cosmos, Dimension Wall could, say, like, work on, like, say, a Dark Destroyer, a Dark Eclipser, or a Forerunner, whereas Magic Cylinder wouldn't because it targets and Dimension Wall doesn't, so that's just one thing I want to change about the deck, is that. The 2 Geometry, because you're only allowed to play 2, but this card is dumb with Ground Collapse, because you play Ground Collapse, it takes up 2 of their monster zones, and then you flip Geometrio, and it gives them 3 Ojama tokens. The tokens can't be attributed, and then each time a token is destroyed, your opponent takes 300 for each. So if your opponent, like, say, Dark Holes it, then you're going to take 300 for each one. So it's really, really great, with, like I said, with Ground Collapse, because you have the 2 zones taken up by Ground Collapse, and the 3 taken up by Ojama tokens. And plus the tokens do count as monsters while they're on the field, technically. So they can take damage from, what's his name? Just Desserts. But not from, Ceasefire, because they don't count as effect monsters. They count as regular monsters because they don't have an effect. But that's just the best thing to do with this card, is to save it whenever you have Ground Collapse, unless your opponent, only if your opponent has some kind of synchros in the extra deck, because you can synchro with them. Like, I played this against Burning Abyss whenever they first got Virgil. Flipped it game 1 and really, really sucked because he couldn't do anything. But then game 2, I flipped it again, and he was able to summon a Rubik and then synchro for a Virgil with 2 of the tokens. So that's just something to kind of make note of, is that they can synchro with them, but they can't tribute them. And if you destroy them, that's just more damage. The next 2 cards, Seal of Forbidden Spell. Like I said, this is one of the cards that you can discard a lot of your cloggy spells with, and if your opponent tries to activate Twin Twister, which could really mess up this deck, because you do play a lot of continuous stuff, you can just discard one of your spells, but okay, no more Twin Twister for you. So yeah, and then also play 2 copies of Wiretap for those annoying traps that can really mess this up. The 3 main ones are Royal Decree, Anti-Spell Fragrance, and, what was it? Fairy Wind. Fairy Wind, Royal Decree, and Anti-Spell Fragrance are like 3 of the 4 cards this deck needs to watch out for. The other one being, Twin Twister, or in some cases, Anti-Magic Arrow. But Twin Twister would probably be the more likely one. But just those annoying trap cards could really, really mess up this deck. And also in this rare case you do attack, and they're like, nah, you gotta, like, Magic Cylinder and Mirror Force. And also, if you have this set, if they try to bottomless your Lava Golem, you can just be like, okay, nope, you're still getting your Lava Golem. And then, of course, to kind of go along with our Ojama tokens, I went with Harpy tokens, just because Harpies are some of my favorite monsters. And plus, it's kind of funny, because if you look at the artwork for Harpy's Hunting Ground, Harpy Lady One's actually hunting down the Ojamas, so I thought that was kind of ironic. And then also these custom tokens I got from TCG player orders. I use these to kind of mark what zones are taken up by Ground Collapse. But yeah, that's basically it for my updated Burn deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is definitely one of the more budget-friendly decks, just because a lot of these cards are old commons and rares, and even the foils you can get for really, really cheap. And you don't even have to get the foils. Like, you can get Lava Golems out of the Battle City Duelist pack. The Marsh Wands, you can get them in common for really cheap. Same with, like, Pots of Duality, Battle Faders as well. This is just, like, a really, really, really affordable deck, and once you learn all the ins and outs and combos, it can do really, really well at what it does best, and that's kind of pissing off your opponent, because it burns them for massive amounts of damage really, really quick, and then you can just sit there and kind of control the game state until they either have an out to your field, or you just burn them for game. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the deck profile. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and as always, I will catch you guys later.